Hello and welcome to the ADHD Artist Podcast, where we explore and celebrate the lives of artists with ADHD. Listen to interviews with all different types of artists with ADHD, where we talk about life, art, superpowers, and... Wait, what was I saying? Hosted by Sarah Gise, your fellow ADHD artist. Thanks for joining. Hello, friends. Welcome back. This is episode 7 of the ADHD Artist Podcast. And what a weird summer it's been. Today is, what is today? August 17th. And yeah, this has been one of the weirder summers that I've been a part of. But, you know, we're all making the most of it. So for this episode, I interviewed Anna Wagner. Anna was an art student with a focus in ceramics in Arkansas up until a few months ago. So I was very curious to find out what it was like to graduate as an art student in a pandemic. Where do you go from there and what's that like? And when I first was introduced to Anna, I was very intrigued by the way that she incorporated her experiences of her ADHD and medication specifically into her art. And I was really intrigued by her speaking about how the ADHD medication she was on caused her to not be hungry and she was getting sick all the time. And at a certain point, she had to decide between her physical health and her ability to focus. So I was just really excited to talk to her. So a little about Anna. She is a ceramics artist from Wichita, Kansas, who graduated in 2020 with a BFA from the University of Central Arkansas. She received many art scholarships while at the school and was an active member of 4 different fine arts clubs on campus. Her current body of work stems from the perspective of someone dealing with ADHD and draws attention to the effects of taking Adderall mentally, socially, and physically. I kind of mentioned that before. Since she began discussing her experiences a few years ago, she has gathered inspiration from those who have dealt with similar disabilities and medication side effects. With that, she began illustrating these narratives through portraiture and some text. The functional ceramic shapes signify her personal struggles with medications that restrained her appetite. The looseness of the forms juxtapose against the detailed renderings of the portraits. A constant battle between who she truly is and who she wishes to be. So I have the links in the episode notes. Definitely check her out. She's a talented young artist, and I think you'll appreciate her passion for what she does. All right, here is the interview. Enjoy. All right. Hello. I am here with Anna Wagner. Hi, Anna. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for letting me come on the show.
I was so excited for you to come on because I heard a podcast interview of yours, and the way that you speak about your ADHD and how you incorporate it into your art was so fascinating. So, have there been any super noticeable ADHD moments that you've had in the last day or so?
In the last day or so, absolutely. Like before this interview, I had to completely mentally prepare myself for it. I was diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's at the age of 4, and it's slight Asperger's. And what they told my mom was, it's a small percentage and it will eventually go away, but I don't think it's ever went away because I have social anxiety really bad. And I tend to say aloud of what I'm thinking, even though it's really raunchy and inappropriate at the moment, which is kind of how I got my partner, Josh. He loved how abrasive I was. And I was like, I hate how abrasive I was. It's so embarrassing. And he's like, but that's what I love about you.
Yeah, that's so great that he embraces that about you.
Yeah. It's so embarrassing because I'll say something and I'm like, why the hell did I just say that? But of course, I had to mentally prepare. I had to take my Adderall so that way it'll just calm me down, and then my thoughts would be a little bit more aligned. I had to take, some of the questionnaires that you had, and I had to write answers of my own. And I have it right next to my screen right now. And I played a song and like sang it out loud a couple of times so that way I can get some of that energy out. And sometimes I do kind of tend to have like a little bit of I wouldn't say a lisp, but I tend to mix up my words a lot whenever I'm nervous. So sometimes like, singing out loud or doing something crazy, with your voice out loud can kind of align those words out a little bit more and not make me so nervous. So does that make any sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. It's so interesting that you say that about singing, because so singing is so calming for me. And for me, it just like brings me into the present instead of being stuck in my brain. It's like something about that brings me into the present. Do you use that a lot to like manage your anxiety?
I do a lot of word vomit, a lot. So I would talk a lot. So one of the things that I love the most to calm myself down is driving in my car, because that is the moment that I can just really let everything out that's in my head that's conformed together into a knot out. And I actually had a difficult time when I was little, whenever I was going through speech therapy, because there was I would think so much. I thought a lot. I overthink things. And so I had such a hard time talking. And so sometimes just like forcing yourself to talk it out, no matter what it is, even if you get it mixed up into like the spaghetti ball, like sometimes talking it out or singing it out, whatever you do with your voice, it helps a lot.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you talk about like word vomit, because I call it verbal processing. That's just what I do for myself. And my boyfriend is great about this, where I'll come out and be like, okay, I have a thought, but I don't know the answer yet, and it's not going to come out right, but I just need to like say it all. And then I
need to say
he
it
just
over
listens.
and over and over again, a different way.
Right.
So give me a second.
Yeah. And he's been so patient with me, but it is frustrating sometimes when I'm like verbally processing something and they're like, well, you said that. Why did you say that? And I'm like, well, I said that so that I could get to this point.
Yes.
that I'm making,
I do exactly what my mom does. So she's a lot worse than I am. So she'll go in like circles over and over and over again until like it gets to her point, and she has to say it. Even you can be on your phone, but she's basically talking for her sake, for her to get her point out. It has nothing to do with you. And like I do the same thing. Like sometimes I just talk for me to figure like what is it that I'm really trying to say.
I completely relate to that.
Yeah.
So speaking of your mom and stuff, so you said you were diagnosed at age 4. That's super young, right? So what was that like?
So it started when so I was born in Tulsa or Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. We moved whenever I was 3. And we'll be in the house. I would play with my toys, whatever I'm doing, and my mom would call my name, Anna, Anna, and I would act like I had never heard her, and I could be in the same room with her, be like, Anna, and I'll get up and walk right past her to do something else. And so she finally took me to the doctor, and she's like, I think my child is deaf. And the doctor's like, Carrie, your daughter's not deaf. She has severe ADHD. I think you need to, get her properly diagnosed and like do some testing on her. And so that's how it all started. So I went through a lot of social experiments, speech therapy, all the work. And I was finally diagnosed with ADHD with slight Asperger's at the age of 4 years old. And they said that my Asperger's is so light that it can be cured within a couple of years, but I think it's still intact within me because I still have severe anxiety issues. And like I said before with you, there are moments to where like I don't really think about what I'm saying, and that's part of like symptoms with Asperger's. And I know everyone tends to do that, but I feel like with me it's a constant thing, and it's really, and I have a hard time speaking and saying what I need to say. So it's
that's fascinating. So I want to know, a lot of people that I've had on this podcast that I've talked to, and just a lot of my friends are, performers, actors, and they've taught themselves to be on and all that. So I'm curious how doing ceramics and molding clay helps with your mental health, with any anxiety you have?
So I was the kind of student that loved every medium whenever I was in undergrad. I loved painting. I loved printmaking, loved sculpture. I loved working in the wood shop. But there's just something about clay that was just so malleable and so peaceful about it. And I think what got me interested in the process is the fact that clay forces you to be patient. And people with ADHD, I feel like, are not patient. And I have learned patience in my life because of art making and because of how finicky clay can really be if you're not aware of how to treat it. And
interesting.
Yeah, and so clay is like water. Clay has memory. If one area of your object is drier than the other, it will crack during the firing stages. If that area is too dry, you can't apply any more wet clay because it's not wet, so it's no longer compatible. There are many reasons on why and how ceramic objects will have cracks and loose ends during their final firing stages, but that's only scratching the surface on how wonderful and complex ceramics can be, which is why it's not always an easy medium. You have to learn patience and forgiveness when you're working with clay, which is why I think I love it so much.
When did you discover that you loved clay?
So I discovered that it's not the first time I've ever touched clay, but whenever I realized that I loved it was I was taking a contemporary media class in Holly Law's course at UCA, and I created this bust, and I created little individual kitten fetuses on this shovel, and out of like air dry clay, which is nothing like real clay, by the way. It's the kind of clay that you get at Walmart. And I created these little kitten fetuses, and I dipped them in resin so that way they can stay hard, and I put them on a shovel, and then I made like this bust out of air dry clay, and that was the very beginning. But I didn't take a ceramic class until like probably about a year or two later, when I realized like maybe it's something I need to explore, because that was one of the projects I really loved the most.
So do you like think of a project like that beforehand and then do it, or does touching the clay kind of help you form those ideas?
I think it kind of goes both ways. So a lot of art making has a lot to do with it's the beginning. It's one of the beginnings of a preliminary sketch. Even though it's a three-dimensional form of thing, you're still sketching with this medium. And so like I have a bunch of preliminary sketches that I've made on my phone, but they don't always end up turning out exactly like I originally had them, because you are still figuring yourself out, and you're still figuring out what this form is going to be and how it portrays you. So for example, whenever I created Blowout, my recent piece, I attached a preliminary sketch on Instagram, and as you can see, like it has a lot of similarities, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah. So do you kind of make those decisions as you go, and as you are seeing it?
Yeah. And a lot of times it's just random. And I know it's kind of breaking the rules a little bit. I mean, there's no rules whenever you're art making, but there's like a certain process that you have to take with ceramics, I feel like, and I tend to break the rules a lot. So even after like the first firing, which is called a bisque firing, and that's when that's when the clay body is not all the way fired, but it's still like very porous, and so you can still, that's when you can apply your colorants to it or your glazes to it before the final firing. And so there are a lot of times I'll be like, I don't like this piece right here, so I would either break it off and reapply it somewhere else with specific clay material, or I would fire something completely separate and then add it on later.
Does that feel good to break it off? I'm just imagining like, I don't like this, I'm taking it off.
Yeah, and like you, that I love it because like usually I am a very indecisive person. I'm a very ambivalent person whenever I am doing anything. Nothing is perfect, and I will break it and I'll destroy it and I'll redo it for hours and hours, and I'll just keep on adding on to it, and I will never let it go until I feel like it is completely perfect, and that could be hours and hours and hours. Wow. So I think when it comes to ceramics, and because it's such a finicky girl, it does feel good to kind of end up breaking a piece off whenever I just simply don't like it.
Yeah, there's a nice control in that. It's like instead of just having to adapt to it, it's like, no, this is my creation and I get to do with it what I want.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of have to be stubborn with it.
Yeah. So can I throw a question at you that I specifically didn't put in the email just because I wanted to get your opinion on the spot?
Lay it on me.
Okay. What does it feel like to make your art? Like in your body and in your mind?
I feel like I'm finally at peace with myself. It feels like this is the most authentic me that I can be. No one is around me. I don't have to pretend to be anybody else. I can just be me. And it's a type of meditation. It's really hard for me to meditate. I've tried meditation where I just sit down on the floor and try to be quiet, but like my head just keeps going into different doorways, and it's really hard to do that. But whenever I am focusing on creating work, my mind is simply, it's not the fact that there's no thought. It's the fact that all of my energy and all of everything that I am goes into making this one thing right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think about anything else.
That does sound so peaceful.
It's very freeing. And whenever this pandemic happened, and I graduated and I got back from South Dakota with Jason Briggs, I was kind of technically supposed to graduate last fall. I split up my internship so that way I can have more variety. So last year I went to a residency in New York called the Clay Arts Center, and I learned what it was like to teach kids, because I wanted to be a college professor someday. So I was helping teach kids with Nikki Lau and a couple of the residents there. And I kind of learned what a residency was going to be like. And then I also wanted to know what it was like to be an artist who had a family. Because of course with someone who had ADHD, I've always wondered, like, God, I've been with Josh for like 5 years. I know we're going to have a family eventually. How can someone, especially a woman with ADHD, spend that much time with their family and also that much time in the studio? So
the balance of it all.
Yeah. Where is that balance, and what does that balance look like? So I asked Jason Briggs, and I loved his work from Ceramics 1 years ago. And so he, of course, agreed for me to come up there, and had a great time with him. I loved his kids, I loved his wife, and had an idea of what that good balance was. And I came back around the beginning of March, and I went to work for about a few weeks, and all of a sudden the quarantine happened. And so I was out of a job for 2 months. And so I hit a moment where I was extremely depressed. My studio wasn't even up and running yet. Apparently our college, UCA, was closed for the rest of the year, so not a lot of students can go in there, unless you're finishing the rest of the semester. Fortunately enough, I was an alumni, and there was this one moment that I was laying on the couch all day and I couldn't get up. I didn't even want to watch TV, and I was crying, and Josh came up to me and said, "What is wrong?" And I couldn't say it. I was just so quiet. So he he put on my shoes and like he got me up and he's like, we need to take a walk. We need to walk this off. And I couldn't get past our vehicles. And I just finally sat down in my car and like told him everything. Like, I feel like my profession is on hold and I just graduated. I have no money. I don't know what to do. So finally, Josh like calmed me down and coaxed me. He's like, everybody's going through this. You are not the only one. You just need to find a way. And maybe finding a way is just making art. So after that day, I was like, he's right. This is who I am. I'm not just going to let this historical chaos interrupt my artistic flow. If I really want to be an artist, now is the time.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really allowed to go up to the school, but I did. I did every single day, and I made 2 pieces. One is still being worked on, and the other one is Blowout.
Wow, which you created. When did you finish Blowout, your recent piece?
I finally finished her about 2 months ago.
Okay.
She had a lot of cracks and stuff, and there was a lot of work that I had to do with her like after the firing. But she finally got done about 2 months ago, and she's about to be exhibited at the Craven Arts Council.
That's amazing. So do you feel like you have developed relationships with these art pieces of yours? I just find it so interesting that you personify them too, by calling it her. And I love that. I'm just curious to know about your relationship with them.
So with Blowout is supposed to resemble what it's like to shut down. And I went through a lot of that growing up. It's this feeling like there's this air bubble, this explosion, this huge negative energy within you that needs to be released, but you don't know how. And it's this self-destruction that you have within yourself. And I felt like I went through that whenever this quarantine did happen, because I was trying to figure out like, what the hell am I going to do? Like my career is put on hold. I don't even know where to start first or, what to do.
Yeah.
And so it's a reflection of what I went through my whole life, of this internal detriment that we go through.
Yeah.
So finally, like at the end of the day, you just kind of you get exhausted from that ball of energy that's so negative that it kind of blows you out.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you are able to channel yourself through your art pieces. Can you talk a little bit about some of the artwork you've made that was inspired by your ADHD?
So I will mention one. There's this one, and this was actually an inspiration by a woman that I've met during NCECA last year. So NCECA is a ceramic conference that the ceramic community does every year. And so what they do is they exhibit works. They have their booths to sell like different types of clays, glazes, kilns, throwing wheels, and then a lot of artists try to sell their work. And then they also have like lecture meetings about like whatever ceramic, anything.
Yeah.
And there was this one meeting that had to do with ADHD, so I went to it. And so in this discussion, we all discussed like how do you control your ADHD? Like, what is it? How do you feel? Tell us about it. And this one girl explains her experience. And she says, sometimes I get so overwhelmed with what I want to say that it becomes too much. And I eventually have to tell myself, pause. And there were tears in her eyes whenever she said this, because you can tell like this is such an overwhelming moment for her to even just to admit that. Yeah. And that's a lot to admit to a group of people that you don't even. And so there is this one plate called Pause, and it's dedicated to that girl.
Wow. You were talking about how your work is commonly centered on the the absence of hunger with the ADHD medication. Was that when it started? Was that when it sparked? Or did you start that before that moment?
So the beginning of creating work about hunger and ADHD started about a couple to a few years ago. I started Sculpture 1 and Ceramics 1. And in Sculpture 1, I was really obsessed with the emancipated female forms that represented my experiences with having to choose, my physical health over my mental health and vice versa. And so I made this alabaster stone piece. I also made this plaster piece of this woman who was just skin and bones anorexic. They were headless and like no limbs and everything, and just focused on like the body itself. And I would explain during the critiques, I would explain to the students like my experiences with taking Adderall and all the medications throughout my life, and having to choose between my mental health and my physical health, and how frustrated and confused I've been with it. And after the critiques, I'll get a few students to come up to me and tell me their experiences. And it was at that moment I realized, like, this is the path that I need to take in my artistic career, because this is actually helping not only them, but it's helping me, because I'm realizing that I'm not the only one that feels this way.
Yeah. I mean, I feel you there. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast. Yeah. When I was in undergrad, like, I didn't talk about it at all. It's just so misunderstood that I didn't want people to suddenly, I'm an actor. And so I didn't want people to be watching me on stage and be like, oh, she's spaced out right there. Oh, she, like all this and put all this judgment when they don't understand how ADHD works. They don't understand hyperfocus and all these other things. And so just putting it out in the world, like, I've found that a lot of people are reaching out to me being like, I didn't know we could talk about this. Was there a decision that was made where all of a sudden now we can like talk about this?
Yeah. I feel like this community really needs to, and I'm not saying that there's communities that have not, try to communicate and try to educate other people, but it's just, I feel like it needs to be a little bit broader. And I've actually like had some conversations, and I've been reading a little bit, and I feel like in a way we kind of overdiagnose like children. And yes, I know I've even met a lot of children that I know have it for sure. But I'm saying, like, I think we need to do the right diagnosis. And I'm not talking about let's have a little chat for a few minutes and I think you have ADHD. Right. I think we need to have crucial, specific treatment, diagnosis, and outcome conclusion. Yes, you have ADHD into adults.
And instead of just throwing meds at this, like once you have the diagnosis, explaining that, even because I was 8, but they explained it to me like, oh, well, if your head hurts, you take a Tylenol. And so just take the medication. And I didn't understand I was like, is something wrong with me? Like, is my brain broken? And so it wasn't explained to me. And so of course that's going to haunt me the rest of my life, Yeah.
So for you, like, when do you take you still do take Adderall or Vyvanse or whatever? When do you take?
I don't as much anymore. I had a tumultuous relationship with Adderall specifically.
Get it 100%.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I want to hear more about your like hunger with that, because I think when I started taking Adderall was around 6th grade, and I developed a very minor eating disorder because I just wasn't hungry and I wouldn't eat all day. And then I started seeing myself in the mirror and I was like, wow, you look so fat. You look so fat. Like, and even though I was actually getting skinnier, all I could see was myself getting bigger. And there's, all kinds of things we could talk about with body shaming and all that. But like what I experienced was that with Adderall. And then later it was more how it affected my brain and these sort of addictive qualities it can have, where you start to question whether you are capable of going through a day without taking it. And for me, it was the day that I really remember was, so I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and I really loved it growing up. And it's so easy to read, right? Like it's very easy to digest. But I remember sitting at the airport when I was in college, and I was going back to Texas from LA, because I went to college out in LA. And I picked up a Harry Potter book to read, and this was like 7 a.m. And I told myself, oh, you didn't take your medication today, so you won't be able to read it. And I was like, all of a sudden I caught myself, and I was like, what are you saying? Are you saying that you can't enjoy this thing that you've always enjoyed because you haven't taken your medication? So anyways, so I had all kinds of issues with that, but now it's trickier, because as a freelance artist, I don't necessarily need to be on all day. And in fact, when I wake up in the morning, if I just took an Adderall, especially like XR, then I would be on all day. But then what happens when I have a rehearsal in the evening that I want to be on for? Do I take another one? Well, then I can't sleep. And it's just this weird dilemma. And I have really great psychiatrists now, but I didn't always, that kind of helped me through it. And and they switched me to, I tried like Concerta and Ritalin, which seemed to work better for me than Adderall and Vyvanse.
I tried Ritalin and I've tried Vyvanse before taking Adderall. So I didn't take Vyvanse until like I was probably in my late teens. And then because it wasn't doing anything for me, it just made me stop eating. I stopped doing that. And then I started taking Adderall whenever I moved here to Arkansas. And it was like the first time I actually felt like I was normal. And I know, like, if I actually had that question asked me, like, what is the definition of normal? And I was like, the way that I don't feel. Everything that's not me. So I took Adderall, like, I took half a pill. I was prescribed 20 milligrams, and I would take half of it. And I would almost take it every single day. And I was losing the weight again. And it got to the point to where I started noticing my body changes. Like I started looking like I was drugged out. You can see some of my rib cage a little bit. You can see my backbone. My face was sunken in to the point that you can see my upper cheekbone. And my hair was just really dry and unhealthy because I just wasn't eating at all. And so it got to the point where like I can't do this anymore to myself, as much as I love how I feel whenever I'm on it, because I feel normal for once and I can actually focus. Like I'm not okay. And so the day that I stopped taking Adderall, before my class, I had a hair appointment and I chopped off all of my hair to shoulder length. And I stopped taking Adderall for a few years. And of course, like I did okay because I was making art. That was like my other like medication, was making art. And I started taking it again about a couple years ago. But now that I'm, older, and I know what happened to me. I have a lot more control of the substance now, so I try to eat a little bit before I take it, and I only take it when I truly really need it. But I still, like, even as a grown-up, I still have such high anxiety over like even simple things like answering phone calls, reading emails, having mail being at my doorway. And whenever I would tell people that I have ADHD and slight Asperger's, they would be surprised because I've always acted normal. And that's the thing. It's different between me and some people with ADHD because I was diagnosed with it young. So I know how to control myself. And I know how to become a fraud. I know how to become a fraud. I know how to fake it, but I can only fake it for so long. But even with my closest friends that I had like studios next to, which is my friend Kristen and Wes, they would see it. They know that I zone out a lot, and I would be working on my artwork for hours on end, like between 9 to 16 hours a day. I'll be working in my studio, and there'll be times to where even like my friend Kristen she'll come in my studio and she'll like talk to me about her day, and like I'm so focused on my work, and I have to like, I realize that she's there, so I have to stop myself, turn my body completely, and I'm like, Kristen, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she's like, it's okay, girl. I know you're in your zone. It's okay. I'll just watch, that 70s show with you while you're making work. Don't mind that I'm here. Just, I'll be right next to you.
It's that, you like that hyper focus.
Yeah. Do you have a tic that you normally do because of your ADHD?
So all growing up, my tic was hair touching, which I know you mentioned earlier was one of yours.
Yeah.
Especially when I was in all these little performing groups, and my big thing was I would always touch my hair whenever I get nervous, whenever like any time, and I still do it because it's a pretty natural thing, like people touch their hair, but when you do it all the time.
Yeah, mine is also the hair flipping, because I have like curly hair, and so like I flip it like one side and another, and it's like with the hair, especially for women, it's like a way for us to like hide our face, hide our insecurities. And so I think it's a good safety net to have. It's like a safety blanket for you.
Yep.
I did the whole hair touching, hair flipping all the time. So a lot of times, and this has nothing, and if my friends or family members are listening to this, just know that has nothing to do with you. This is because of a condition that I had all my life. So it had nothing to do with you guys. I love you guys. But I have social anxiety really bad. And so whenever Josh and I do go and have like social gatherings, parties, whatever, I have to take breaks because like I can only put up a front for so long, and I would have to like kind of drink a little bit or take my Adderall, because like it's the only thing that will make me feel like a normal person in society. And so I would have to take breaks every once in a while to go to the bathroom or go another part of the room to have that peace and quiet and to kind of rejuvenate myself.
Yeah.
So.
What else do you do to pull yourself out of that on like the bad days? Do you have any other tricks that you've learned, that you've taught yourself?
Here's another thing. I'm still learning about my own ADHD, and I've been asked this questions a lot, and over the time, like I have thought about it, but I think so, and I've talked about this in my artist statement too. So ever since I was a kid, TV shows and movies were such a huge thing for me. So I usually, whenever I am overwhelmed with something, I tend to put on a movie that I've seen like over and over again, like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, like those Ghibli movies, or like a comedy. And I am a huge fan of comedy and laughing at myself and laughing at the world. I believe that your life is one big comedy skit. And another thing that I do is I drive. I go out and I drive. And to feel like driving for me is a good way for you to be still while being in motion.
Yeah. So, question. What are your dreams for the future?
So I'm trying right now at the moment, trying to get myself out there, putting my work in galleries as much as I can, and trying to apply for short-term residencies because I want to be all over the place. I don't want to be in one place at one time because that's just who I am. Trying to get into residencies, and hopefully within a couple of years I get my MFA degree. And so far what I see in my future is becoming a college professor, so that way I can probably discover other students that are like me and tell them, look, I did it, I can help you get through it. And it's a wonderful thing if you do become an artist. It's not just do it, and I want to encourage these kids who have these invisible mental disabilities like Asperger's and bipolarness and ADHD and whatever, and just let them know, like, you can't do it. You just got to believe in yourself. If I can do it, you can do it, and I'll help you get there.
Well, all that you're saying is something that I think needs to be more part of our society. So I am very excited. I'm just really excited for you. And I'm sorry that you had to graduate during a pandemic, but I think one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on here is how passionately you talk about not just your art and wanting to be an artist and like, you know, sell your pieces and that sort of thing, but also really tapping into the mental health of people. And I love what you say about invisible illnesses. So I think that's very exciting. How can people find your work?
So I do have a website and I do have an Instagram page. My Instagram is A.L.WAGNER_gallery. And that's on Instagram.
Great.
My website is alwagnergallery.com.
Sweet. So yes. I'll also link those in the episode.
I do have one last question for you.
Sure.
I do have one, but I just want to hear what you say.
Okay.
Does your ADHD have a specific song?
This is hard. So I don't know that there's a song that I have heard that captures my ADHD, like the lyrics capture it or anything, but I will tell you that there is a song that calms me when I get really, really overwhelmed, and it's called Falling by Ben Queller.
Ooh.
Yeah. What's yours?
My song is like the epitome, I feel like, about my ADHD all my life, and it's called Girl with Anachronism by the Dresden Dolls.
Ooh, I love the Dresden Dolls. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's such a fun song, and like if you read the lyrics, it does talk about like a girl that goes through mental episodes and she has to be medicated, but this is who I am and there's nothing you can do about it. Even you can call the doctors, it's the same thing over and over again. I'm just crazy. So, and like even the mood of the song is so playful. I just love it, and I feel like it is like the epitome of, I feel like, what I go through.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I love Amanda Palmer. She's just so
I love
awesome.
Her.
Awesome. It has been so nice getting to know you and having you on this podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
I really appreciate you like coming to me. Like I remember you adding me on Instagram and I saw like ADHD Artist Podcast. Oh my God, I have to listen to this. And it is such an honor that you actually came to me and like asked me to do this interview, because I feel like there's so much to say, and I really want to hear what other people have to say, because we need to stick together, because a lot of times we feel alone. And so it's so amazing that you're doing this for people and for yourself to figure out where are we and who we are. So thank you so much for starting this podcast.
Of course. I mean, right, exactly. So this has been amazing. Take care, and I hope we can stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's it for today for the ADHD Artist Podcast. This podcast was produced by me, Sarah Gise. Original music composed by Christopher Aaron Narr. You can find more of his work at www.christopheraaronnar.com. Narr is spelled Knarr. Podcast artwork by Joseph Ramsky. For any inquiries, you can contact him directly at jramski3@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the ADHD Artist Pod.